Welcome to Marketing. Grab some coffee and let's talk about what's working in marketing, who these strategies are designed for, and how to be customer-centric while we do it. Hi, this is Leanne with Marketing. Today I'm joined with Alex Montas, the head of marketing at Bennett Labs. He is a fractional CMO for fintech and subscription-based companies. Alex, tell us how you got to this point in your career and about your background.
And first of all, I'm so excited to be here. I think that you know, I always get I've been getting on a lot of podcasts, and you rarely find podcasts that are not quite selling something, and I want to go deep versus broad. And I commend you for everything you're creating here for the type of conversations you are trying to do. So, I hope this doesn't get cut out because I really enjoy kind of like what you're doing. In terms of me, I've been doing marketing for about 11 years now. I think I came to marketing how people used to do it, like in a more conventional manner. Like I actually went to school for marketing. I spent the first half of my career in finance and product management. And I found that I felt like I was so far away from the action, and it was either sales or marketing. I felt like I was a better storyteller, written communicator. So marketing was it. I had really interesting experiences that allowed me to make a marketer. Like something we haven't talked about, it was I owned a grocery store. And in this grocery store, when you put a sign outside, do more people come in? If you change the price, do less people buy, and then you make if, in case that you increase the price, you have a higher margin. A grocery store opened across the street from us, and they were like underpricing us. We couldn't figure out why. So it's just like, how do you differentiate, right? And I wouldn't call it that at the time, like differentiation or pricing or margin or all of this other stuff, but that's essentially what I was doing. And as I had this grocery store, I was like, wow, I probably should get better at this. And I started reading books, and marketing was it. So I got an MBA. Then I went into regular CPG. I had an internship at Mud Chocolate, worked on, so many interesting projects there. Got recruited by Verizon, and Verizon has like top 5 budget here in the US. So even as a senior manager, you legit, I had a $50 million budget. That was an amazing opportunity. Worked at places like Bloomberg. But lately, now I'm in a mid-sized company called Ben Labs. It was an agency, a service agency, traditionally doing product placement and influencer, that 3 to 5 years ago decided to become an AI company. And they've been investing on data, they've been investing on product, they've been investing on all of that. And I came in as the head of growth for their SaaS division about 3 years ago, got promoted a few times, and now I'm the head of marketing for the overall company. So, yeah, that's a little bit of how I got started. I've been in all sorts of situations. So, for example, I was the head of paid media twice. And I remember like my budget got taken away, you know, like in every time I've been a marketer, my budget goes away. But when you are the head of paid media and your budget goes away, it's like, what are you supposed to do? Um, so I've gone through all sorts of situations. I've also had my own agency. I've worked with all tons of clients. But yeah, for now I'm in house and doing the fractional CMO thing. Working right now, I'm working with an amazing fintech, and that's my baby. And I also work with subscription businesses, and I love subscription businesses because you have the whole like LTV, CAC. You have to learn a lot about activation, onboarding, all of these other things. And but it's a really old business, right? Verizon is a subscription business. People don't call it that. But it's the same thing for the small fintech I'm working with, where they charge $10 for their smallest subscription. So excited to be here today, and excited to go deep on marketing.
I appreciate it. And, I think I'm going to call out a couple things that you compared Verizon to a subscription business because it absolutely is. So before, there's so many things, and I've gotten on this soapbox myself about how a lot of the things that we used to just do, we called brand loyalty, and brand loyalty has shifted to subscriptions.
Hmm.
And like I'll save the analogies for a different time. But speaking of soapboxes, what is your big marketing strategic thing that you want to shout out to the world, or you see this like mountain that we're all trying to climb? Like what is it for you?
Hmm. So and obviously we had a brief chat about this, but I've been thinking about the state of marketing in 2023, and it's good that I mentioned Verizon. And we didn't touch upon this. Verizon is a brand first company. The LTV for a regular telecom company person is $3,000. So so that means that per person, Verizon has $3,000, like theoretically $2,999 to spend in order to acquire you and make money. And a lot of what you learn at at old school CPG, I also worked at, I mentioned Mars and all of that, is that you need to get into the consideration set before you complete a sale. So that's the soapbox for today. 2023 was a particularly hard year for marketers, right? A lot of us saw our budgets being cut in half, or even more so than that, right? I just was in a panel earlier today with 15 marketers where 13 of them lost budget and people in 2023. And now, as they're going into 2024, out of those 13 marketers, a good 10 had higher kind of expectations from management. And what I want to talk about today is just like, how do you deal with this? How do you deal with the fact that all of us in 2024 have to do more with less because the math is not adding up? And I suspect that we have to go back to some fundamentals. First, we need to start thinking through expenditures. We cannot just capture. We spent 2023 trying to capture leads, capture customers, and spending on bottom of the funnel things like search and things like that, where what, all of those tactics probably are running out if they didn't run out a long time ago. So now we're going to have to go back and do those things that we were doing, that old school marketers were doing, which is just regular old brand marketing, spend more time there. But also we have to get better at setting expectations. We also have to get better at focus, right? And by focus is like, for example, one of my colleagues talked about today. I was like, hey, they asked me to promote 4 different products. And I was like, but they just cut your budget. How are you going to do that? And, finally, only once you have your focus, only once you have this understanding that, what, your customers don't really know you, then we can talk about maybe innovating. And innovation this year is going to be different. It's going to have to be very low cost. So we have some thoughts about how to do that. But the soapbox of the day is that marketing is tough in 2024. And if we are to make it better, we really need to think carefully about how do we as marketers talk to our colleagues, our managers, our bosses, our counterparts in sales and product. And also, how do we start thinking through more on a long-term basis and not just focusing on short-term? Let's get
Absolutely.
going.
And if you've listened to this podcast before, you can see why Alex is such a great fit for this podcast specifically. Because this is part of like our ethos, right? Is that you can get short-term wins, but not at the cost of the long-term gains. Like you have to stay in business, absolutely. You can't just say like, "Oh, well, we're not going to do anything to work on conversions." Like that's silly. No one's saying that. But if you want to have a business 2, 3, 4, 5 quarters down the line, you certainly cannot neglect the things that differentiate you and create a value proposition. Because then what? Like, what do you have? Like, are you just an aggregator for leads? That's one
Correct.
business, but make sure that's the business you're actually in, right? Um, so there's so many good points about what you said. It's hard for me to like distill one that I want to like chase after. What are some stories that like or like small anecdotes that you've experienced that kind of led you to feeling like this or that stuck out these kind of things to you?
Yeah. I think without naming names, I myself have been in positions where I felt very strong about the things that we talked about, where I'm like, you know what, we cannot just put 100% of our budget in lead, capture. That doesn't mean, to your point, that we put a percentage of our budget there. But what I've learned is that it's not 100%, right? Oftentimes it's 30% will do usually, but obviously your mileage may vary. But I have been in very tough situations where my boss has asked me to really focus on the short term. And I have done that. I've seen this movie. I, as my boss, I got to do what I have to do. And that didn't save me. That didn't help me, because what happened was a year later, we ran out of leads, right? We ran out, right? Like you mentioned, it's like a lead generator. But after a while, if you just keep on capturing leads, if you just keep on just like running offers, if you're a direct to consumer business, I know this is primarily B2B, you're just going to run out of customers that are going to be able to take you up on that offer. Because if you, at any given point, you have to be doing both. And for me specifically, the story went, I was like, you know what? I am going to please my boss. I am going to do this thing. And guess what? At the end of that year, we didn't hit our numbers. We didn't hit the thing. And then, I don't know if this has ever happened. I'm pretty sure it's probably going to happen to a lot of your listeners. They get blamed for doing the thing that they didn't want to get done in the first place. And if they weren't like, hey, I told you so, this thing is not going to work, but you still did it, but it's still your fault. So pick your poison, because at the end of the day, as it happened to me, it's going to blow back on you. So now I see this movie in 2023, 2024, and it's like giving me like a lot of, this is happening again. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm glad you said it, because the first like cliche, completely baloney advice that people say is, "Oh, well, why didn't you manage up?" Like, okay, cool. I would love to just manage up and tell like leadership that something's unreasonable. They have people that they have to manage up to. They have like other things that they have to
Mm-hmm.
answer for. And those things include your salary. Those things include operational costs. Those things include very real like things that need to exist. And it's not just a matter of like having some charismatic conversation, being a personality hire and being like, "Oh, well, boss, I think we should really do it this way." That's not the real world. I wish it was that way and that was simple. But it's nuanced. There's black and white, there's gray, and there's details to the context that you need both. And it's very hard when things are squeezed to do more, like to do more, period, end of story, let alone to do more with less. And so, I think about this quite a lot, and it comes back to efficiency. In financial services, the metric for business success is the efficiency ratio, which is different than, like in banking, that's what they judge the banks on. Which is different than necessarily an ROI, but it's kind of the same. It's just a different terminology for it. And what I think about is, how people treated venture capital in 2010, 2009, you know, where people make a mistake is where they go for the feast and famine, like temptation of the day. And when you've got lots of capital and money is quote unquote cheap, the temptation is to just kind of spend it and maybe not be as like conservative with it. And then when it's a famine, the like people are like crabs trying to escape a barrel, and they'll just pull anyone down to try to get up. And you can't do
Mm-hmm.
that either. Where does this lead you?
No, I'm glad you brought it up, because it's not as simple as just manage up, right? And in fact, I know for me or other people go like, well, if you present data, then you're going to be good to go. But at the end of the day, what I've learned is that humans, is, they're not perfectly, they're not perfectly rational, logical all the time. And the further you go in your career, actually, right? Like, and now the last job you got to deal with is, it's interesting. Like if your boss is a marketer, that may be easier than if your boss is a non-marketer, right? Because now you have somebody who is very smart. Let's say they're a founder, they're a CEO, or a board, right? Like, sometimes you have to go and you have to pitch to a board. And all of those people are there for a reason, right? To your point, they're paying your salary. And I think it's very tough because, we talked about the both of us have kids. We talked about our livelihoods, are involved. And the last thing you want to do is go against the grain. But what I the further I go in my career, what I'm learning is, and it's hard to figure out 100% of the time, is that there has to be a partnership. There has to be a partnership with your boss. There has to be a partnership with your counterparts. Because, for example, this year it's going to be tough to go to this random event that sales wants you to go to just to try it out because there's no cash. So if I'm going to do an event, it has to be a sure thing. And then in terms of how I manage up, what I'm learning is that I appreciate my boss, and I have to be you know sensitive to the pressure they have as well. They have tons of pressure. And in my case, reporting to a founder is a lot more pressure, I imagine, that when I was just reporting to a CMO of a bigger company. And I'm thinking, having that idea of, like, what, this is a sensitive topic. I understand that if I have pressure, you have even more so, if you want to cater to them that way. I feel the need to provide you with this information before we move forward. And that may be tough right there and then. And then the other thing I'm learning to do is just detach, right? Like, I'm like, it's still up to you. You are the boss. So we're gonna do what you are asking me to do. But I think is our jobs as marketers to be clear and to document, hey, these are the kind of decisions that led to this. And these are my recommendations. And hopefully you are a marketer that, if you're listening to the show, you are somebody that knows how to blend the long term and the short term. And then as you're making these decisions, the hope that if you get anything out of this podcast is that at any given point, you understand that the logical and the emotional need to be mixed, and as well as the long term and the short term. And anytime you sacrifice either, right? If you sacrifice the short term, you're not going to have a job. So you have to get some revenue up front. But if you sacrifice the long term, I'm talking about like as soon as 3 months, you're going to start feeling it. You're going to fail. So let me conclude, because I'm going on a soapbox now. But this managing up thing is one of the most vital things that you have to do as a marketer. And they don't teach you this in marketing school or in the podcast or usually in all of these other things, because what they do is people are giving you some random playbook. But the playbook, the reason it may not work is because it's like, did you talk to your CFO? Did you talk to sales, right? Like, okay, you hear tons of ABM playbooks out there. They don't talk about, like, how are we going to go and convince our salespeople to actually, like, take this into consideration. So as your career goes, the emotional intelligence is a bigger part of your job. The managing up is a bigger, and laterally is a bigger part of your job. And in 2024, is an even bigger part of your job, because you're going to have to say no more often. You're going to have to focus more, and you're going to have to push back probably a little bit with the CFOs, which is like, hey, I get it. This is the pressure, but we don't want to go to our board and tell them that we're going to 10x things if we can't. That's going to be worse. However, now I'm going to detach, and I'm going to, and now that I provided you with information, I provided you with the data, I did my best. I did it with love, right? I did it with kindness. Now, at the end of the day, they're still the boss. And, we all respond to somebody. They respond to somebody else. They respond to whoever they do. And now we're going to have to let them do their decisions. But it's up to us to be fair, kind, and actually say the truth as we move forward. Otherwise, I think we, as a profession, we're losing something here.
I love this. I took some notes because there's a couple things that this spurred in me. Um, First of all, what I love about people that have worked for themselves as like freelancers or an agency background is you start to see yourself as a business of one. And
Mm,
you start to see that your clients are internal and external. My boss is my client. My
Yeah.
boss is my customer. The exact same thing I would need to do to build rapport, to educate, to consult, to act as a subject matter expert to a client is
Yeah.
exactly what I need to do to my boss because they are my customer. My salary is the same thing as if they were giving me a client invoice.
Mm.
It's the same thing. It's so much alike that people lose sight of that. And people that have only existed in corporate environments sometimes don't recognize that they have such a transferable skill. But really there's not much difference between pitching an initiative or reporting results than there is pitching a brand new client. The only thing you're not doing is outbound sales. And maybe you're still like doing that because maybe your corporation is so large that you have to reach out to somebody in a completely different thing. So
Mhm.
first of all, love that. Agree with that so heavily. And I've said that to CROs and I've said it to CMOs and they're like, "Yes, we are your customers. The C-suite is your customer. Thank you." And they were so excited to be heard. Um, the second part is and the power of and. When we have a statement and we
Mhm.
know that someone's making a mistake, or we know that this could very easily turn into a liability instead of an asset, we use the word and instead of but.
Mm.
That's a great idea, but you've just lost them. You just unapologized. You just unkinded, right? But when you say and, it changes it so dramatically. And as marketers, we really need to understand the power of our language and not be flippant with it, which is such a temptation for me personally because I just chat. But when we say and, there we go with the word but. And when we say the word and, we can turn something into education, into internal marketing, into internal like building everybody up. That's a great idea. We should do these ads and make sure that our branding is flawless through the entire
Mm.
experience for the customer.
Mm.
We should do these ads and back it up with some content on our website that if they leave that funnel, we can recapture them and that money's not misspent. We should and when you start to and you start to add and you start to just tweak it just a little bit, it makes people A less defensive because you're not calling their baby ugly. But B, you're refining it together. And that's really where being the grown up in the room, being a professional and showing up at work, that's the differentiator that as people that are trying to excel in our careers, we might want to take into consideration.
Yeah. And I think being humble is part of that. And I know, and having some detachment, right? So I know for
Yeah.
me, I was like, oh my God, I'm really into kicking ass at my job. And sometimes that doesn't help the situation, right? That because it's like you gotta have a little bit of detachment to understand that yes, you are reading all this content on LinkedIn, you're talking to all these other marketers. In my case, you went to school for it, but that doesn't mean anything if you're not able to get this thought process across. And as we think about again the state of 2024, where we're operating in an environment where less is more, um, the ability to use empathy and the ability to get out of your own ego. And I have to say, part of this soapbox is for myself because I sometimes before sometimes I put these ideas, I go and I check with other marketers, I do all the math, I do all the things, I do all the so I try to be 99% sure. And then I get that no, oh my God, that hurts. And and what I'm practicing is just like, you know what? Hey, listen, I am 100% confident this is the right thing to do. And and I also happen to be able to disagree or commit. So if we want to go this other route, ha, let's do it, and let's just maybe put it into consideration as we move forward. But this year in a specific, especially after last year, most of us are not going to succeed without having those tough conversations, without focusing a little bit more, without saying no as much as we move, or And to your point, as we move forward. So I think that's maybe the biggest thing as we come into to this year. How do we tackle all of these other things? Because I'm guessing being a human in a world of AI, or as what's happening now with all of this technological disruption. But that doesn't change the market. That doesn't change the economy. And when the market is down, um, it's so tough to kind of like have these vital conversations that we should be having.
Absolutely. Um, in there, the detachment, one phrase that I found myself really adopting is explaining my idea, my concept, my or my add-on, and then saying, "But I defer to your judgment."
Oh.
And because that at the end of the day, it's their judgment call. It's gonna blow up in their faces, not yours. It's their risk to take, and you can't assume someone else's risk for them. You can
Mm,
try, but it's their risk that they are taking with their spot. And, as much as there are matrices to organizations and all different ways of having a company, there is at some point someone has to make a call, and it's on them for being the one that did it. And you can know what's on, and I also think we need to, like you said, like detach but also compartmentalize and take that step backwards, because you only know what you're contributing. You're not privy to all of the things that that person above you that's making that call is. And
mhm,
sometimes they have information or nuance that is confidential because of their position, or they have some experience where they've seen something before. They didn't you, I always like to assign someone the value of getting to where they're at, for a reason.
mm,
For a reason, like, they're your boss for a reason. You may not agree with them 100% of the time,
yeah.
and that's okay. That's normal. There's no one in the world, name me one person that you've ever met that is older than 6 months that you have agreed with for 100% of your entire time knowing them. There's always some give and take. That's part of being a human. Um, and then if you feel like you are so boxed in, find something that's your own. I have a podcast. No one can tell me no on my podcast. Yeah, I get to do whatever I want with it. There I that find an outlet where, if it's so important to your mental health to be yourself or to do something your way because you're just that stubborn, or you're that convicted, or you have some strong emotions attached to it, find an outlet for it, but be respectful in your workplace, because
I
other
agree.
people have things that they have to answer to.
Yeah. So as we discussed the managing up part, right? And then we got a little bit into the focus part. As we get into the rest of the podcast, I do want to say that, again, as we consider the state of marketing in 2024, the other thing we need to consider is going back into this brand thing. We're gonna have to take more risks, and that may mean looking at your tone of voice, looking, and is this something that's cutting through the clutter? And I know this podcast comes out maybe like a month from now.
Yeah.
In the last 2 days, I think there was a Super Bowl app where I don't know if you saw the Super Bowl commercials where Kanye had this commercial where it was just like his phone, and apparently he already that he has 3x the amount of sales from that commercial. But then the other thing that was really interesting, I think 2 days ago, Mark Zuckerberg, just came out with a little selfie video. It looks like a selfie video, but it's not. But it's a very low production video. And I realized it's like, wow, Meta could have been doing this thing, right? Meta could have Mark as a spokesperson, kind of being like Elon Musk. And that wasn't working for what. And then this year, he was like, all right, Vision Pro is out. It's time for me to put on the gloves. And that cut through the clutter, right? And something about that video has affected people. Again, this is what date are we on today? February 14th. Happy Valentine's. And again, because I just want to put everything together. Yes, we have to manage up. We have to have focus, And then we also got to go and do marketing, people. And as we do this marketing, how are we going to do it in 2024 if we're not willing to take risks? Any thoughts on
Right.
that?
Well, and to draw the connection, because I agree. I do, this is why we have loose prompts instead of a script.
Yeah.
Because where I see something, I follow it. Where to bring it back to, our managers are our internal marketing and they are customer. When we look at our outside customer, are we doing the same thing for them? Are we
Mm,
really getting to know them? Are we really considering the problems they're facing? Are we really considering the risks that they're taking in order to adopt our product? Are we getting to know them and their needs and
mm,
why they should do what we're marketing to them? And that comes back to branding, to your point. That comes back to the basics. That comes back to marketing 101. What's our messaging? What's our positioning? What are we supporting these ideas by? How are we cutting through the clutter? Your boss has clutter, your customer has clutter. You have clutter. We've all got it. It's everywhere. How are
mm.
you not being noise to be ignored by any wide swath of people? Um, what are your thoughts?
No, I think that more than ever, I think, I remember the days of, as a former media buyer, still media buyer, 3, 4 years ago, I want to say 4 years ago at this point, I was able to put up an ad, ugliest ad ever, very little thought about positioning or messaging or whatnot, and it would perform. But those days are long gone. And which is, I think, part of what's contributing to the state of marketing today is that is not as easy, right? Nothing
Yeah.
is being given. There's no organic there, right? Like all of, like, even LinkedIn, which was, I think, the last remaining bastion of organic, is just like, definitely has been decimated organic reach. Pay to play is very expensive. So now, if you're going to have advertising, or not even advertising, right? Just your web page, your emails, your whatnot, you are going to, if I and I am a marketer, so this is the year I'm looking to take some risks, or I'm looking to think that how can I be bold, right? And I love what you're saying. It's just cut through the clutter for your boss and managing up. But also, as we start thinking through, okay, now that I have to, assuming that goes okay, and we got across the point of managing up and being kind. But now I also, okay, I got to do my day-to-day job. And if there was one multiplier that is not just spending on top of funnel, but also like really thinking through how that is going to cut through, really thinking through where, it's not about being highly productized or all of these other things, but actually being authentic. And it's tough because as corporations or as small businesses or whatever, I have to talk like this. It's kind of something that we are all tempted to do, but more and more and more, um, what that just didn't work. So now we're gonna have to change matters. And by the way, not every product leads to greater revenue. Right? Like I'm saying that because all of the
Yeah.
copy of all of the SaaS out there, get Slack and increase your revenue. Get I don't know, what are we, StreamYard, and increase your revenue. And it's mostly like you have to make that middle of the road connection that get Slack through greater collaboration. You
Yes.
may increase your revenue and things like that, and show examples of that. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of like, you know kind of start adding a little bit of those flavors, because we are marketers at the end of the day, and I want to make sure that we talk a little bit of the marketing side, as also as much as we talk about, again, at least for me, most of my job is managing personalities. I do report to a founder at the moment, right? And I'm C-suite, so I have to deal with that's a lot of my job. But I would be remiss if I don't start thinking, the other half is making sure that I'm kicking ass as I go to market. And this year, I think more than any other year, even with the smaller business, if I recall, mentioning this my fintech client, he just got funded, and I'm so excited for him. And my first thought was, Yeah, but most of this, your budget is not enough to cut through the clutter. What are we gonna do? Can we get Tupac talking about stocks or something like that, like AI Tupac or whatever it is? Maybe that'll cut through. And if that doesn't work, we'll try something else. But it's just, what are we doing this? If if you guys don't know who Tupac is, then I can't help you. But
Yeah, you're
yeah,
listening to the wrong podcast if you don't know.
okay. But yeah, how are we gonna do? I'll let you know how that goes. If I get AI Tupac to kind of start doing all this stock trade readings and I don't get sued. So anyway, those are some of the things that I've been thinking about, and I wonder, as how would you capture it now? How would you summarize it? Since I know you're very good at this.
I mean, I love it because I'm also kind of like thinking I'm looking at my second screen. I'm like, how is this a disclaimer? Because with every soapbox and story, there's always that asterisk that there's always that like, how does this where
Mm.
does this apply and not apply? You know what? You could be the best of the best of the best. If the product sucks, it don't matter. You can't cut.
Oh,
You're gonna
don't tell me that. I love
that's
it. I love it.
but that's essentially what I heard from you, right? That's like a lot aligned with that is that not all products are the ones that are going to be that winner for you. They're not going to be the heavyweight champ. They're not going to be the best of the best unless you communicate to your customer Slack so you can collaborate better. If you were just Slack, I exist. Like, no, you have to tell your customer and hold their hand through it. And you have to have um whether it's Tupac or whoever it is, explaining the story or explaining the use or being like an avatar where people can see themselves and they can
Mm,
see themselves successfully so that it comes back to that subscription thing we started with so that they are subscribing, they are, activating, they are, it's no longer just a back to the original point. It's not just a get a lead, it's a get
mhm,
a lead and help them thrive. Get a lead and help them by building a relationship with them that's authentic. It's it's so much more. I don't even think integrated marketing should be its own role. I think all marketing should be integrated. I think all
okay.
marketing should be life cycle. I don't think there's ever a point in which it should just like, oh, I only, I only think about this small section of marketing because it's as Christina Garnett said, it's a labyrinth. And our job is to hold people's hands through the labyrinth. And I love it so much because she's so on point with it. And that supports what we're talking about today is that, it's gotta be more than that. Um, what are your thoughts?
No, it's interesting. I love how you summarize that. I think you're very gifted, and in summarizing and then adding and then moving the thought alone. So I think that, yeah, I think that all of these products last year we saw that we all, regardless of what they did, they all promoted the same outcome, and we lost something. So I think that the last thing I wanted to add to that conversation is just that you touched a little bit upon to this about this integrated marketing and how truly integrated marketing is a full funnel marketing role. And I think the last thing I would add to that is like, and again going back to what I would do or what I'm thinking about this year is actual customer marketing, land and spend, referrals. Just because I acquired you doesn't mean the work stops there. And I don't know if because a lot of marketing teams are not set up to talk to customers after the fact. But I think like more and more, that's where the opportunities are, right? And I don't know if it's a probably wouldn't be a paid referral thing, but maybe if that works for your business. There's always the asterisk you want to add. So again, nothing here is a general go and do it. But if for your business, what is one way in which you can get your customers kind of being your biggest cheerleaders? How can you maybe spend business within your customers? Those are some of the things that probably make sense um, this year, outside of just changing The one marketer in the panel earlier today that did really well, they just changed their ICP. They were like, okay, you know what? SaaS is not doing well. I'm gonna go talk to bankers. So, so
Do
that
it. If you gotta pivot, find what works. Like, it shouldn't be set in stone. I love it.
exactly,
Awesome.
exactly.
Well,
So yeah, so those are the things that are coming to mind. That's my soapbox as of February 14th, 2024. You have to focus. You have to be able to manage up and have true conversations. You have to be able to be bold in how you go to market with your brand. And then you have to think through the entire funnel and start thinking through a little bit more about how can I use my current customers? Can I land and span? Can I get them to do referrals? I would add partnerships and things like that. Those are the things that in 2024 are going to work. But at the end of the day, I haven't said anything new. I'm just saying the old is new again. The basic infrastructures that we were not taking because money was easy is no longer in place. So now we have to come back to the old classics. And this is a time where a few of us get to shine as long as long as we take that into consideration. Obviously, this all changes. Your organization, your boss, your customers are all different. So adapt as needed. Any thoughts?
absolutely. Back to if you're not good at the basics, you should not be growing past them. And
Mhm.
that's 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 it. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, if you like it when money's cheap, you could get by looking like you are good at your job.
Mm.
But now that money's not so cheap, you really can't do that. Um I have a few more minutes. So I
All
want
right.
to kind of get to, because we could talk forever. That's the thing about this podcast. We could go on forever because we love talking about this stuff. So we've kind of talked about like the future of like where you think marketing is going, but I want to know more about you, Alex. I want to
Mm.
know, what is a question someone should ask you but they don't? And what I mean by this is that sometimes people get so caught up in XYZ, like marketing that we just talked about. They don't talk about ABC. They don't know the basics. They're trying to just jump the line. But what
Mm.
is, or maybe there's some like thing that you are especially, it's like your favorite hobby and you just want to talk about it more. What is something about you or your expertise that someone should ask you?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. I know you sent me this prompt, but I didn't
It's
get
so
this.
hard. It's a whale.
I kept on thinking, and I was like, it's gonna come during the podcast, and I don't know if it came through, but something that I've been thinking a lot, given the topic in regards to questions that I'm asking more often, is and I wish I was asked the same, and this is outside of like my hobbies or something like that. But for me, emotional intelligence is something where I wish, I would have had a lot more of that, or earlier in my career, and I'm still every day you're still learning. And a question that I'm practicing both with my wife and at work and I wish people would ask me more often is, what data or information can I provide so you can change your mind? And I know for me, as a leader, like sometimes I like for my team to come in with ideas, but if they don't, I'm just like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. And once I'm there, like I'm going, right? Because it's like, okay, you had your chance. But that question, like, hey, what piece of data do you need in order to change your mind? Both from my boss and maybe me asking my boss or whoever it is, I think could be a key question that I wish was asked more often. And I think about this a lot because it's like, well, maybe going back to what we were talking about earlier, and maybe this is a good kind of like roundabout. My boss has some piece of data he's not providing or something that he needs by wanting to run whatever initiative. For me, I've have directives from my boss and or from whoever. So it would be great if more people, if my direct reports or whoever it is would ask me that. So I don't know if that's the kind of questions you're looking for, but that's the one that came to mind.
I love it. I love it so much
Yeah.
because, like, we spend so much time talking about the psychology of buying and behavioral science and stuff, but, like, man, we're people too. Some
Mhm.
by just asking that question, it's so emotionally intelligent because it's also identifying the subtext is, are you open to changing your mind?
I never thought about it like that. Yeah.
Because what it does is it aligns you together as a partnership,
Mm.
and it tests the water, like, maybe they respond like, "I'm nothing. There is nothing you could say that could change my mind."
Yeah.
And you have to be okay with that, but you're also more likely to find that out instead of just bickering or, going back and forth, because
Correct.
they'll have to own that. And maybe they won't, because not everyone's that brave. Not everyone communicates in that manner. Some people aren't comfortable with confrontation or assertiveness. And there are some people are trained to be like, "Oh, well, I'm not sure." And you have to read the subtext of that person in their context. But it's such a good question. You
Yeah.
can you
Well,
can
thank
find
you.
out so much from it. I think it's pure gold. Um, so I'm definitely gonna think about that one more often.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Well, any other questions on your end, Leanne?
If someone wants to find you or they want to know like more about you or just get in touch, what is the best way for them to do it?
Yeah, so I'm big. I'm big on LinkedIn. That's where you and I met. So LinkedIn, search for Alex Montas. If not, alexmontas.com is my website, and then you can find the LinkedIn through there. So find me there. And excited to hear and talk to more marketers. If you guys ever want to talk shop about how to sell initiatives or whether the initiative itself makes sense, I'm here to talk it up with everybody. So thank you so much for this space, Leanne. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for responding to my somewhat cold DM. If you don't know me, then I'm real big on just going for it on LinkedIn. I'll slide into people's DMs without shame. Worst they can do is say no. And so, Alex, I super duper appreciate the time that you've taken, the insights that you shared, and the wisdom that you brought with it. Once again, my name is Leanne. If you want to contact me, it's info@markigy, markigy.com. And I want to clarify that Alex's last name is spelled with an A, Mantas, instead of ES.
Mm.
So you got to find the right Alex Montas. Um,
Thank you.
I always make people spell things out. So thank you for listening, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful day taking these thoughts and putting them into practice.